Hello there. This is Paul Glumaz with General Welfare Presents, and today is the 10th of July. I have some very spectacular things to report. You wouldn't necessarily consider these things to be absolutely spectacular, but if you were following the regular media, but these things are absolutely spectacular. Now, there was an article in the United Kingdom Daily Mail, a lengthy article, based on a leak of encrypted diplomatic cables between the British ambassador to the United States, Sir Kim Darroch, and the Foreign Office. And these cable leaks are incredibly revealing of the British role in controlling the United States, not just in trying to set up the removal of Donald Trump, but also for getting Donald Trump to go to war with Iraq. I mean, with Iran, and also to revive the war against Assad in Syria. Now, the way this works is Sir Kim is one of the leading knighted elites of Great Britain, and he's very close to the networks that were running the coup against Donald Trump. We're talking about former MI6 director Richard Dearlove, his direct subordinate who ran the Russia desk, Eastern European desk, Christopher Steele, and this whole apparatus, which also ran the Obama administration, or profoundly influenced the Obama administration, had prepared in the event that Trump would unexpectedly win the 2016 election to minimally remove him through the role of the media, through the claims of Russian collusion, through a whole series of things. And Sir Kim Darroch was right in the middle of all that. And he came in as ambassador in the middle of all this. And his view in the early phase of his ambassadorship was that Trump was imminently removable. And that's what he promoted as the ambassador from Great Britain. At a certain point, when it became evident that Trump was not going to be removed, Sir Kim shifted and became totally friendly with Donald Trump. Very supportive, very pro-Trump, so to speak. And at the same time, in the cables, he was saying, okay, we're shifting this, and we're now going to go to, to try to misdirect Trump into a war in order to destroy him. So, and in the cables, he says that when Trump did not go for was 10 minutes away after the drone was downed by Iran, 10 minutes away from attacking Iran, Kim said, don't worry about that. Basically, he said, all you need is one American dead, and then the thing will be on, which indicates a false flag potential. And you did get something like that recently when a group of British naval Marines were helicoptered down onto a Panamanian registered tanker in international waters outside of Spain and seized a tanker, which was supposed to be carrying oil for Iran. This was an incredible provocation on the part of the British to force the hand of the United States in going after Iran. So that kind of thing is going on. However, the real revelations of all of this is very, very significant. That the British were coordinating the entire operation to go to war with Iran. That it was being run by the British. It's not being run by the Israelis. It's being run by the British. The second thing, and this is even more, in the cables, Sir Kim Darroch discusses how the policy he has is to reach out to all of the people that Trump talks to outside the government, and he references the fact that Trump likes to spend his evenings talking to his friends or talking to other people outside the government to hear what they have to say, and to surround him with these individuals, to locate these individuals and cultivate them. And so through the British Embassy and all of the British networks in Washington and elsewhere, they have been cultivating all the people that talk to Trump, and he calls this flooding the area with and at the same time targeting for attack those people who do not represent the British view, or who are not who could not be cultivated to have the British view, in whatever flavor or whatever form that might be. And you have that with Manafort, Flynn, and Roger Stone as three big examples of advisors to Donald Trump who do not fit the mold of the kind of people that Trump would be advised. Now, what this also means is that through the Five Eyes, that is through the shared intelligence between the U.S., Canada, Britain, United Kingdom, New Zealand, Australia, the Five Eyes, the British intelligence has complete access to all of the NSA surveillances, which means that they're able to surveil, they're able to pick up through surveillance, who Donald Trump is talking to. And they can do the kind of micro-targeting, micromanaging and micro-targeting of those people. This is incredible. This is incredible. This is an incredible development that this has come out. Now, I do believe Sir Kim has resigned. Trump called him a stupid and a very stupid person and a pompous ass. Trump called him a pompous ass. But the media and the of course do not want the actual import of what I'm just saying be fully disseminated about the role of the British. This is and how they operate. And there are indications that John Bolton was a very frequent guest, both privately in discussions with Sir Kim, as well as very frequent attendee to various gala functions at the British Embassy. Of course, the British Embassy does all these functions and they invite everybody and they all come and it's all nice and gooey. Now, in that whole situation, the entire state visit of Donald Trump was part of the charm offensive to move Trump in the direction of being manipulated into a war with Iran, especially. So this is incredible. This revelation is incredible. Now, what it also points to is that there is significant opposition inside Great Britain to the policy of going to war with Iran, to the policies of the monarchy, to the genocidal orientation of the monarchy, which is the green agenda. Its population reduction is causing all these crises. It's terrorism. It's the drug trade. It's also causing all these refugees, which are going into Europe and disrupting all of Europe. Similarly in the US, and so forth. So this whole policy of the British, of war, is also occurring, and this revelation is also occurring in the context of the Brexit situation not being resolved. It's not resolved. And what's at stake in the Brexit situation is whether the City of London will have, fingertip control financially over Europe and over the world. Because if they can't, if the Brexit separates the financial community from the European, then they have to move to Frankfurt or what have you, and that impacts the entire situation. And in that context, the world's largest financial institution and speculator, Deutsche Bank, is right now facing a meltdown, just like Lehman Brothers, only it's much bigger than Lehman Brothers. And that meltdown, and they've now moved to, they've announced 18,000 employees, primarily in New York and most of all in London, be cut. And they're moving out of this particular area of financial speculation, but they're hemorrhaging, and their losses, their publicly announced losses are 8 billion or 9 billion or something like that, but it's much more than that. And so now we're heading into potentially the same kind of crisis we had in 2008 that we have now with Deutsche Bank being the new Lehman Brothers, only bigger. And in that context, you have this leak to the Daily Mail of the encrypted secret cables between the United Kingdom ambassador to the Foreign Office. Now, I want to preface this. This is very important. We have quotes from Henry Kissinger back 40 years ago, actually longer, 40 years ago, that Henry Kissinger kept the British Foreign Office better informed of what the State Department was doing than the White House. So if you go back 2 generations, or 2.5 generations, or 2 generations, let's say, this special relationship between Britain and the United States played a very key role. And also, this special relationship played a very key role in inducing George W. Bush to go into Iraq, which is a very destructive and disastrous event. And it was the British Foreign Office, Tony Blair, and British intelligence that swung the thing. We know for a fact that Bush's father was against it. Ben Scowcroft was against it. We know for a fact that the Secretary of State, Colin Powell, was against going in. And it was so contentious that some of the British media, including the BBC, brought LaRouche on to educate the United Kingdom's population on why this war had to be stopped, why it couldn't happen. And it was all based on a fake, dossier. He has nuclear weapons ready to go, weapons of mass destruction. The whole thing was a fraud, and everyone involved knew it was a fraud. But they had such an ability to flood the zone, as Sir Kim says, flood the zone, flood this area, through personal associations and so forth, that they were able to get the United States to do this. So, in spite of all the opposition that exists within the government, of course, Dick Cheney played the key role. So this British thing is special relationship is so influential in the history of the United States, going back to the Vietnam War, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the assassination of King, the assassination of Bobby Kennedy. And the ability of the British to flood the zone of informal and formal relations with different varieties of the narrative that they want to cultivate in people. This is very important. Now, I haven't seen this, but Politico a few days ago has put out the list of all the people that go to these British functions, British embassy functions. I don't know. I don't have that list. I didn't look at it, but this is incredibly profound and breaking. But we're still in a very profound crisis with respect to Iran. And the situation with Iran is very serious. And similar was the situation with North Korea. But it's still, in the case of North Korea, it was the role of Russia, China, South Korea, Japan, and India also indirectly in creating the environment for Trump to do what he did, and including providing ironclad assurances to North Korea that they had security guarantees from both Russia and China. This is very important. A similar kind of diplomatic effort has to come from those countries with respect to Iran. Iran needs to have that kind of, with Trump being brought in at the last end to make a deal. That the Korean or the Singapore process, or where Kim and Trump first met, or the process has to now be applied to Iran. However, it's a similar situation with Iran. Given a certain religious orientation of the Iranian clergy, they do have a martyr end times complex. So the more you threaten them, the more you put sanctions, the more it fulfills a certain prophecy and a martyrdom, the less likely you have of getting a dialogue going, because they tend to view the West in absolute religious terms, not in terms of, not, and the more you force them in that direction, the more likely you're not going to be able to get a negotiation going. So this is very, 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 very critical what's going on here, and I say this because we're at a profound turning point here. The British Empire has been fully exposed in a way that it has never been exposed. I've always known this, how the British operate, and they will give you, a whole palette of different interpretations. You want to do the right wing thing, you want to do the left wing thing, you want to do the religious thing. Okay, we'll give you all different palettes, but not a clear understanding of where it's all coming from. And now this takes me into the deeper question internally in the United States. Okay, you have to understand this. We have a problem in the United States, in the Democratic Party especially, but also in the Republican Party. And that problem stems from the Vietnam War and the assassination of Kennedy, King and Bobby Kennedy. That period from 63 to 68. And the key was the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was played on TV, and it transformed an entire generation of young people, or a good portion of those people, who were, shall we say, the college-bound grouping, into hating America for being an imperial force, for supporting the old colonial, perpetuating the old European colonial system. And then those other people who got caught up in the war and took the opposite position of, we're stopping communism, this is the right thing to do, this is patriotic, and so forth and so on. And this divide split the working class, who have a more patriotic orientation, from the students who escaped Vietnam by going into the college. And in that context, the rock, drug, sex counterculture occurred. The beginning of the anti-science around the fear of nuclear weapons, and the green agenda began. All of the sexual stuff that we see today began. And what happened is the people who went in that direction later became the leaders, like Nancy, the leaders of the Democratic Party, and they became the New Left. They became Socialist USA, and so forth and so on. But they abandoned the idea of progress in so doing, and the colleges and the philosophy departments were taken over by existentialism, phenomenology, nihilism, philosophies of Heidegger, Derrida, Sartre, and so forth and so on. So there's a rejection of truth, the rejection of a knowable truth. So therefore, you don't have truth. You just have a violent rejection of any kind of natural law, of principles or truth. And that is the modern form of liberalism that emerged, then was foisted upon the world by the neocons and the neoliberals and so forth and so on. So this generation only had Lyndon LaRouche, and what Lyndon LaRouche did with the young people that he recruited, which is my generation, to carry forward a tradition from the past of the American system, of the United States, of Lincoln, FDR, and Kennedy, and King. We carried that tradition into the Reagan administration, into the Clinton administration. We kept alive that tradition. And in the bigger sphere of things, that tradition was based upon a space program and a commitment for a crash fusion program to develop fusion power and nuclear, but primarily get fusion online. We had a Fusion Energy Foundation founded in 1974, which was seized and shut down by the government in 1987. So this is what we are up against. And I'm laying this now because Donald Trump has revived the space program from the standpoint of industrial development of the moon and helium-3 for fusion. And the other nations doing this, Europe, China, Russia, and India have the same perspective. And this is very, very important. On this July 20th, there is a huge, we're having a huge webcast on this. This is the anniversary, I believe, of the moon, 50th anniversary of the moon landing. So, in this context, something very profound has occurred. The president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, in an interview, began discussing the question of fusion and the need for a crash fusion program and the need to bring all the nations together to develop fusion. This is huge. And the context in which he said is the context of the environmental movement, promoting solar and wind and all of this. He says this is not going to get the billions of people the clean water and lifestyle that they would prefer. But fusion, a crash program for fusion, represents another alternative, an alternative to this kind of decline and so forth. And he says, I don't want to get into the climate debate because whether any of these climate changes are going on, it's the development of fusion power which will give us the means to deal with it. So this, that's what he implied in what he said. So this is huge. This is huge. This is Lyndon LaRouche coming back with a vengeance. And also, I am certain that point of view is coherent with the views of the Chinese, the views of the Indians, and also the view of Donald Trump. I should mention that Donald Trump's favorite uncle was very much involved in the nuclear energy. So Donald Trump has a very strong sense of all of this. So that's the context that this is beginning to shape up, this orientation. And if you can get all these countries, all these major powers to work together on both the space program and the fusion program, we are going to see a potential unleashing of the productive potential of humanity to overcome and supersede the destruction that's been going on economically, So this is the context for what's going, for the situation which we're going into. But the Iran thing is still very much on the burner. The British have essentially seized a tanker off of, not on Gibraltar, but in off the coast of Spain, and they've done so. They did so without consulting Spain or consulting anybody, and they're trying to force the United States to back them up, because the United States has these sanctions on Iran. So why not have why not seize the tankers, right? Seize the tankers, right? They're violation of trade. So that's the situation that we're heading into, and the liberalism of that has taken over is the ideology. This kind of liberalism that comes out of the collapse of our of a moral view that we had prior to the assassination of Kennedy. This kind of liberalism, which is also very pessimistic about mankind, it's also very cynical about human nature. This liberalism is centered on no nation. It's against the idea of a nation. A nation is evil. We have instead the individual. The individual is comes first, and those who make it deserve the fruits, and those who don't, need to be, maintained somehow. But this liberalism is the ideology of the empire, and we're seeing concerted attacks on this. But most of the conservative ideologies are also liberal in nature. Instead of and they view the human being as basically an animal. So this is the terrain that we're now going into, a resurgence of an optimism based on the future that we might have with fusion and power in the space program.